Tom is an associate director at Hawley, one of the leading mechanical, electrical and public health consulting firms. He's also seconded to the UK Green Building Council as part of their net zero team. So thanks for being with us, Tom. It's great to have you. Over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Amy. Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here today. I'm going to share some perspectives from the UK on net zero, with a bit of a focus on existing real estate. So I guess initial thoughts on kind of the premise today is that I think, yes, net zero for existing real estate is certainly possible, but it's going to present different challenges in different regions. So clearly the age and performance of existing assets is key to this, but also the wider energy infrastructure in regions. Also policy and market incentives for energy performance of buildings is going to be critical to achieve the end outcome. So in the UK, we've set ourselves the target of achieving net zero by 2050, and that target includes the complete decarbonisation of energy usage from buildings by that point. At the UK Green Building Council, we've developed over the last couple of years a framework definition for net zero as part of our ongoing Advancing Net Zero programme. And that basically breaks net zero into two components. So operational carbon from building energy usage and embodied carbon of construction. So for new buildings, a big part of the challenge is around driving down embodied carbon impact of construction through efficient design, reduction of waste, use of circular economy approaches, using and implementing lower carbon materials such as timber within buildings, but also greener versions of concrete and steel. But new buildings are only a fraction of the existing building stock in the UK. It's a small percentage that we replace each year, and the significant proportion of building carbon emissions come from existing buildings. In the UK, a significant proportion of that is related to space heating. We have a heating season in the winter, and most buildings utilise gas boilers and burn fossil fuels to meet that heating demand. At the same time, in recent years, we've made really significant progress in decarbonising our electrical grid through significantly increased offshore wind capacity and other renewables. So our grid electricity is now really low carbon and actually continuing to reduce in carbon intensity, and that's happened over about the last 7 years. So quite rapidly, given the scale of the reduction. But at the same time, conversely, progress in energy efficiency of our existing buildings has been much slower. So we face this challenge of needing to shift away from fossil fuels and the reliance on gas and gas boiler technology to utilise our now green, low carbon electrical infrastructure. So that means the challenge of switching from gas boilers to electric heat pumps, which is a significant challenge in terms of supply chains, skills, quality, training, installations, and wider infrastructure issues. I do have one slide I was going to share with you today. Thank you very much, Richard. So the net zero challenge in the UK is therefore about reducing our energy demand from buildings and electrifying them to the point where the total demand can be met by our green grid and effectively powered by renewables, achieving net zero in simple terms for existing buildings. So this graph comes from a piece of work the UKGBC released last year, deriving energy performance targets for office buildings, and it shows at a UK scale, on the bottom, the orange line is the increase in renewable energy supply from our increasing offshore wind capacity. And the blue purple line at the top shows the reduction that will be needed in our total energy demand for those two to balance. to that point by 2050, where in theory our total energy supply has been reduced to the point where our offshore wind capacity can meet that. So yeah, if we don't get the energy demand low enough, we're going to have to bring back, bring online fossil fuel power generation. So the challenge is how quickly we can incentivize and drive the optimization of building operations, implement retrofit works, and make this shift away from fossil fuel heating sources. So it's a huge challenge, but there are some really good examples from around the world of how systemic change has been delivered in certain sectors. So one example being the Neighbours energy rating scheme in Australia, which has delivered really significant reductions in energy intensities of commercial offices. And that scheme has placed a real focus on energy efficiency in that market. It's made it one of the key KPIs, and it's almost viewed as a proxy for the quality of assets, with a focus and incentives for both landlords and tenants. So on average, the Neighbours scheme in Australia leads to energy reductions of around 33% over a 10-year period of buildings being on the scheme and being certified. So that really does demonstrate to me what can be achieved in so-called legacy assets if you have really focused action and the correct incentives. That scheme's now being replicated in the UK. We've just launched Neighbours UK at the end of last year. So we're looking forward to what can be achieved in that sector in the UK. So to sum up, I think net zero will present different challenges in different locations, but there are some great examples of where rapid and meaningful carbon reductions have been achieved. So I'll pause there and hand back to you, Amy.
Thanks, Tom. Really interesting. Thanks for sharing your insights. We'll go to questions now. If anyone has a question, feel free to send by message or raise your hand. Oh, I think we already have one question from Claire. Actually, let's go to you, Claire.
Hi, thanks. I really loved that presentation. I found it so interesting. At Hawley, I know you design new buildings and work to improve existing buildings. What can those who have existing buildings learn from new buildings?
Thanks, Claire. Yeah, good question. And I think often actually at the moment, the dynamic is actually flipped, and we're actually seeing what new buildings can learn from existing. I think what the Neighbours schemes are showing is that existing assets that don't have any particularly special technologies, through really focused and high quality optimization, can actually get to a really impressive level of energy efficiency, which then kind of makes the point then to new buildings that although they will benefit from the latest technology, you still have to get those buildings delivered and operating correctly when they are, when they come to life.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Claire.